In a bar, Nick's eyes were glued to a beautiful woman with a curvaceous figure. He must have had his eye on her. Just as he was about to approach her, a man walked in. It turned out he was her boyfriend. Later, through their conversation, Nick led his girlfriend to go with him to Atlantic City to play cards, and if they won big, they wouldn't need to work. Instead, they'd be brave and strong, so she threw her arms around him. It turned out this was all their plan. Nick had been hired by this guy to pretend to be a ruffian, helping him get a chance to impress the girl. After the job was done, Nick received a handsome payment. In reality, Nick was a bodyguard working at a law office in Las Vegas. He took on roles as a guardian, keeping casino-going gamblers safe. So Nick was very well known in bodyguard circles. But because of his precarious life, he took on many different jobs to make ends meet. Bodyguard, mercenary, and even playing the part of a thug. As long as it paid and didn't violate his ethics, he'd do anything. After finishing the job, Nick returned home, got some sleep, and then went to work as usual at the office. A young man came looking for Nick. He wanted to hire Nick to protect him while he had fun because this rich guy was afraid that carrying a lot of cash would attract the attention of thugs. But he said that before hiring Nick needed to show him his special abilities so he could trust him. Nick started boasting about his experience. He said he'd been knocked unconscious, blown up by bombs set by bad guys, tricked, or even ganged up on by a whole mob, but in the end, he was still alive and kicking. No accident had ever claimed his life. Furthermore, Nick also had a pilot's license as well as a karate black belt from Tokyo. The man's face looked very pleased with his gig. Not only that, even though he was just a security guard bodyguard, recited 5 weeks later. Nick had also won the National Gold Medal Championship for 3 consecutive years and was fluent in 4 languages. But Nick said he had one bad habit. He was a chronic bullshitter. On the contrary, this guy thought Nick was very humorous and he liked that. In the end, Nick was hired as his personal bodyguard. After work, Nick drove to his usual bar. The waitress came out and told him that a girl named Holly had left him a message. Nick read the note and then drove to Holly's house. Actually, she was Nick's friend. Seeing the bruises on Holly's face, Nick asked her what happened and who had done this to Holly, but unfortunately, she herself didn't know who had attacked her that night. Holly recounted that she had been knocked unconscious that day. A man had dumped her in front of the hospital. Thanks to her survival instinct, Holly crawled to the emergency room door. Just then, a doctor came outside for a smoke. Seeing the girl covered in blood, he quickly pushed her into the emergency room. This was also the reason Holly called Nick. She wanted to hire him to investigate the people who had tortured her. The two sat on the sofa. Holly meticulously told Nick what had happened. Before that, Holly said she had an important appointment that night. After that appointment ended, Holly left using the elevator in which there were 3 young men. Holly noticed the youngest one speaking to the other 2 with a commanding and strong tone. She guessed he was the leader and the other 2 were just bodyguards. After they failed to harass Holly, she was forcibly dragged to their place. Then the leader signaled the 2 big guys to go to the next room. Holly was brutally assaulted. When they were done, they dumped her at the hospital gate. Nick asked which hotel Holly had been at that day. She replied that she had been at the Golden Nugget Hotel. However, according to Nick, that place was full of high rollers. If they weren't criminals, they were people who came to Las Vegas to gamble, and Nick refused her. He reasoned that he didn't know anyone at that hotel, so he couldn't do anything about the people who had kidnapped and tortured Holly. Then Nick went home. Although he said that Nick still secretly snuck into the Golden Nugget Hotel, he knew 2 women who worked in the hotel's laundry and asked for information about the men who had been in the elevator with Holly. The woman arranged to meet Nick at a dinner to mess with Denny because his 2 bodyguards alone were strong enough to break his neck hadn't been compliant. He made Holly say she loved him and if she pleased him, she would be set free. But in the end, Holly was still tortured by him. That evening, Nick waited for Cyrus in the casino lobby. This young man seemed very excited about gambling in Las Vegas for the first time. He took Cyrus on a tour of the city. Contrary to Nick's bored demeanor, Cyrus was very enthusiastic because he thought Nick was actually a special agent and kept asking him which agency Nick worked for. In response, Nick told him he should shut up. After that, Nick let Cyrus freely indulge in his passion. The young man seemed to be having a great time. Meanwhile, Nick couldn't stop thinking about Holly's situation. He drove to her house and told Holly, an employee of Baby's coming to see Denny. You should know that the boss Baby was the head of the criminal underworld in Las Vegas. He owned the largest casino in the city, but the bodyguard didn't care. He slammed the door shut. A little later, Denny felt he couldn't offend the casino boss, so he invited Nick in. At this time, he was soaking in the bathtub. Nick didn't beat around the bush. He said that they were the ones who had humiliated Holly, and today Nick was here for revenge. But these guys to call girl. Then Denny pulled out a gun and threatened Nick. He ordered his 2 henchmen to deal with Nick, but fired at Nick but Nick used a business card that Denny was tied up by Nick to wait for Holly to deal with him. Holly took a pair of scissors out of her handbag, which terrified him. He immediately begged her to spare him. He could give Holly 50. She went to get the money from the drawer and threw it to Nick. She gave him half his. A cut to his private parts made Denny was in excruciating pain. Just when Denny thought his precious jewels were about to be cut off, making his two cronies beside him turn pale with fear. Suddenly, Holly stopped her hand. She decided to spare him and left. When he got home, looking at the 25-0 he had just earned on the table, Nick decided he would try his luck once. Because deep down, Nick just wanted to escape this god-forsaken city as soon as possible and retire from the underworld. But to do that, Nick had to accumulate at least 500. Only gambling could make him rich quickly. He went to the casino and played cards. Nick bet 10, making the female dealer feel contemptuous. But the surprising thing was, the more Nick played, the more he won. Luck had come to him. It turned out Nick was a genuine card sharp. In the past, he had been so addicted to gambling that he lost his entire future. But tonight Nick knew this was his own one. Zero, because he thought that whether he won or lost, he would leave Las Vegas anyway, because he knew Danny wouldn't easily let Nick go after humiliating him in the hotel. It seemed this young man had lost quite a bit, but after talking to Cyrus, he became even more determined to play his best tonight. Cyrus watched Nick's winnings grow more and more. He really admired him. 20 consecutive wins made the manager annoyed with Nick. Everyone gathered around Nick because he had won so big that he attracted all the players there. This final hand would be the decisive one. When Nick flipped over his two cards, everyone waited nervously for the result. In the end, Nick won big again, making everyone around him cheer. Thanks to the money won at the casino, Nick decided to leave this place and go to the Mediterranean. That was his dying wish. Just as Nick was about to go to the cashier to exchange his money, the gambling demon resurfaced. Now Nicker wanted to realize his dream of going to the Mediterranean. He said it was just a pipe dream, and what Nick wanted now was to go back and play more. That's exactly the mentality of gambling addicts. What Nick needed wasn't money. He just wanted to be immersed in his passion for gambling. After that, Nick took his money and went back to play. This time, he decided to go all in with 500. And luckily, Nick won another 25-0. Every time he won, he bet all the money he had just earned. He could easily guess every card the dealer was holding, proving that Nick's gambled a masterly realm. But no, this time, Nick wasn't lucky anymore. He lost all 525-0, but everyone around him applauded Nick. Nick couldn't help but feel regret for not being able to control his gambling urges and losing his retirement money. Cyrus took him back to his hotel room to rest. At this point, Cyrus confessed to Nick that he was a weak person, afraid that when he got older, he would be beaten up by young punks because once on the street, he had witnessed a group of kids beating up an old man. Cyrus begged Nick to teach him some self-defense martial arts because Nick was very famous and Cyrus' idol. He had fighting skills. Just like Nick, Cyrus had a dream to bravely do what he wanted before he died. He only had his intelligence to make money, and it was the only thing he had to defend himself. Cyrus made an offer that Nick couldn't refuse. He said the two of them could team up to increase their chances of winning in the casino. But Nick didn't believe him. He walked away to the bar. Just then, two big guys walked in. They said Denny needed to see Nick, but tough luck for these two. They provoked where he lost at gambling and told him to stop. When Boss Baby met Nick, he said he had received a complaint from Denny. According to him, Nick had used a gun to kill two of his men and rob money to gamble. To clarify the truth, Nick was forced to confront Denny face to face. This guy lied through his teeth. He claimed that Nick was the one who barged into the room and pointed a gun at his head. First, then knocked out two henchmen, tied them to chairs, and shot them. Furthermore, Nick also ran to Danny's desk and stole 50. Moreover, Danny pretended not to understand why Nick went crazy and attacked him. He hadn't done anything to him. At this point, Nick's face was like, let's see how long you can keep bullshitting. The casino boss knew full well this guy was lying because he knew Nick could kill them with his bare hands or an ashtray. No need for a gun. At this moment, Nick stated the real reason he went for revenge. This thug was the one who had raped Holly and brutally tortured her. Therefore, he had helped Holly get revenge. She left a scissor mark on Danny's little guy. The boss demanded Danny take off his pants for inspection, which made him lose control. Danny was humiliated a second time. He was determined to get revenge on Nick. The next morning, Cyrus met Nick one last time to say goodbye before he returned to his city. This young man didn't forget to taunt him, saying he regretted admiring someone like him. Actually, Nick was just a weakling like himself, but though his mouth said so, Cyrus still cared a lot about Nick. Before leaving, Cyrus gave him a ticket to the Mediterranean and a check for 500 to help Nick realize his lifelong dream. But Nick refused, saying of these guys still being dazed. Nick jumped down and took them out one by one. By now Danny had been thoroughly beaten up by him. He ordered his men to advance and continue attacking him, but they were all defeated by Nick thanks to his quick agility using a knife to stab the henchmen in their vital spots. Now only Danny was left. He wasn't afraid and rushed forward to punch Nick in the face, but it had no effect on him. Nick broke Dai's arm, making him die in agony. Saris quickly chased after Nick and gave him the boat ticket and the money. He said he was wrong to call Nick a coward. He would always be Saris's idol. After that, Nick went home and packed his luggage to leave. The movie ends here. What are your thoughts on the movie? Please leave a comment below. Goodbye and see you in the newest videos.